Welcome to More Than the Hype, the podcast where we go beyond the surface, beyond the trends, and straight into real, unfiltered conversations about business. I'm your host, Kristen Taylor. Grab a glass of wine from KT Winery, or water because moisture is important, and let's get into it, because success is more than just the hype. Welcome back, everyone. You are now listening to More Than the Hype, the podcast that goes deeper than just the flex. I say that ironically because that's exactly what this episode is. I got a lot of, and still get a lot of, how did you build this? How did you get here? How did you get this idea? How did you create this company? Questions. And they're all really valid. And I've always thought to myself, what would it look like if I could send someone a link and let them really hear? And so we could have an even better conversation the next time we meet. And this is what that is. I wanted to document this. So when I was reached out to by Miss Greta from back in the day when I was a freshman at the University of Mary Washington, I was in a program where Miss Greta and Miss Lori Diggs were really championing beautiful experiences for people of color, underprivileged people, etc., throughout the university. And I had the opportunity to be part of their program, the STEP program. And fast forward, I don't know, I don't want to date myself, but 10 years later, Miss Greta reached out and asked if I could give kind of like a retrospective conversation about starting the brand, and then kind of also like a current, like where are we at? How are we ebbing and flowing? What is the mental journey behind this? And so I really wanted it to be documented and to make that part of this episode. So today is a little different. You're going to hear me, not see me, with Miss Greta and a group of her peers as well, kind of chatting through. Um, and I really think it'll be interesting just to reflect, even for me, about like the mindset it took, the lessons, the pivots to really build this company and build KT Winery and Mom Juice from the ground up. So whether you're just starting out or if you're deep in the grind, I really hope my journey can offer some insight, some game, or even just a little bit of fuel to keep you going, because you are just now starting. I feel that way now after 4.5 years, and this is just the beginning. So let's get into it. I left for college about a week after I graduated high school, into the summer program, and absolutely loved it. I loved exploring different cultures through the different students that were there, and all those experiences. Eventually, I transferred to Johnson & Wales, which is more on the culinary side, and studied event planning and event management there, and started my first company, which was an event planning service. And I did a lot of weddings, had the opportunity to actually work for the museum there, which is like a partner of the Chrysler. So it's beautiful museum. I served on their board and used to throw their big events and their big fundraisers. And that is actually how I got introduced into alcohol, because, of course, what's one thing you need to get people to donate money is alcohol. So that's when Tito's was first launching, and I got to really experience what it's like to not just throw this event, but get people to experience brands, and then turn that kind of into a career in working in sponsorships and brand development. Worked with really great brands like IKEA, and we put a bed in the middle of a gala so people could see and have fun and take photos. It was hilarious. Building out all those brand activations, and eventually took that to corporate, and then decided to build KT Winery shortly after.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Wow. You did several years in one question. That was excellent. That was excellent because yeah, one of my questions is also too, so you actually went to school for event planning and then you started your own business right after that. You were working in the museum, working on events and sponsorships. But just backtracking a little bit from
Yeah, sorry,
there.
I do get carried away.
No, not at all. Not at all. I appreciate it. What did you find in your childhood or upbringing inspired your interest in the
Mm.
wine industry or hospitality industry in general?
Yeah, so my mom, like I said, was in the Navy, and but we would stay and she would go. So she would come back with wines from all these different countries, and that's kind of how I discovered the world, is through her eyes and through her stories of breaking bread with people in Alaska or the Republic of Georgia or Turkey or any of the stans. Like it was food and wine really bridging people together, and that's really where I got that base from. I've always loved to entertain. And I think this is more so a natural extension, but I think it definitely came from my mom giving me a sense of wonder. And that's how this, created itself. And we've always had a special bottle of wine to celebrate something, whether it was my first time getting my own apartment or my first time whatnot. My mom and I would, she'd come over, we'd have a glass of wine and kind of debrief, talk through the things. And that really set my foundation for how I engage with my best friends and how I created communities in all the different places I've lived. So yeah, I think it's a sense of wonder, in the sense that we're all not that different.
Oh, thank
Mhm.
you. Thank you so much. And that sounds, wow, that sounds really interesting to learn about culture through wine, because your mom is going to all these different countries. And I think it does, I guess that there is a way of learning about that culture through the wine because I've learned too, there's a lot of countries that I wouldn't even think have wine industries, like Croatia, where I was like,
Mhm.
Croatia, but I, realizing Croatia it's actually Mediterranean, so it is
Right.
warmer weathers, temperate. And so it does teach you about cultures a bit in that as well. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. So now that you're the founder and CEO of KT Winery, can you tell us, you told us a little bit about at the beginning of your career journey. So you were at Johnson and Wales, you're working at the museum, you started event planning. And then beyond from that, what professional experiences or roles led you to starting starting KT Winery? Because you had already started some businesses before then.
Yeah. So when I decided that I needed to have a stable income to actually qualify for a house one day, when I went to Dish Network, I was working at the internal creative agency there. So Dish Network, Sling TV, they all have their own kind of army of creatives, around 50 people working on absolutely every part of the business, from the things you see on the walls at Dish to the Super Bowl commercials. So my job was really to take what corporate executives wanted and work with the designers and to make it happen and to kind of translate and make the vision come together. And quickly realized that telecom was not for me. It's a very old industry, which also means it's a little sexist, a lot racist. And I was like, I got to get out of here, but let me take these tools with me. So I ended up working at a few different creative agencies over the next like 4 or 5 years, even while I had started KT Winery, because, income is still important.
Yeah.
So we got to make sure, and we can get down that rabbit hole, but I'm very passionate that I love that people want to quit their job to be an entrepreneur, but you still have to feed yourself and you still have to have a place to live, right?
Yeah,
So I
that's
was just
right.
working insane hours, but I worked for different creative agencies, both on like the B2B SaaS tech side to the St. Regis and all of the luxury hotel side as well, doing similar things. But eventually, before I officially moved into KT Winery full time, my second attempt, because my first attempt, we did not have enough money in the bank to do it. So I had to get back and get a job. Before I moved into KT Winery full time, I was the director of operations for a creative agency in Chicago, working remote. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, and thank you for saying that that you tried to, you're working while you were building KT Winery and also
Mhm.
at one point tried to kind of strike out and do it full time and was like, oops, actually
Mhm.
not getting enough money to make this happen. So you kind of went back and worked and then
Mhm.
launched again. Okay. So I would say with this series, we focus on authenticity and taking leaps of faith. And it sounds like even as approaching and doing the work to build KT Winery, you were taking a lot of leaps of faith. But
Yes.
specifically, how do you feel being authentic and taking leaps of faith factor into you creating KT Winery? And how does that continue to inform your work now?
I think there is. a double-edged sword sometime with authenticity.
Mhm.
Sometimes it means that you're showing your cards and being a little transparent to people who may not be the best, have the best intentions or have the best ideas of how to use that transparency. And
Mhm.
in other ways, I think it creates such a beautiful experience for the people working with you and the vendors who actually have that sense of partnership and the ones who want to build with you. Ultimately, my co-founder and I have this conversation about twice a year. It comes up of, I feel like if we were just more, more fake or we weren't being so honest or whatnot, that this would be easier. It seems like it's easier for other people. But the reality is I love doing what I do because there's not a single person I work with, from an investor to a distributor to a co-founder to an employee, that I can't walk in the room with and be 100% myself, because I've always been that way. There's not such thing as Kristen's having a bad day, she's such a different person today, or Kristen isn't, whatnot. It's everyone gets to experience me how I really am. So there's no need to keep a front. Of course, I will say there have been partnerships that we thought were going to be great and they weren't. And they saw the authenticity and tried to take advantage of it. And it ultimately, though, has moved our business forward, even if it felt like a setback at the time, because now we're building with people who are just so excited and passionate about us thriving. So, double-edged sword, but I think it's 100% worth it, and I have no regrets in in leading with who I really am.
Thank you. Thank you. And I appreciate you saying that it can be a double-edged sword. I think it's about, yeah, how do you leverage that where it can be very it can be a strength for you and it could really get you to the core of what is going to make you successful. But then it's about who's around you, right? That's a really
It
good
is.
thing to say. It's like, who are you sharing that with? And as I always say, I say this, are they picking up what you're putting down, right?
Right.
And not everybody will. And it takes sometimes a certain level of wisdom and discernment to know who are the people who are going to really work with us and be in a good partnership and understand what we're doing so that we can be like build and be successful together and make a
Yeah.
good partnership. So thank you for that. Thank you for saying that it can be a double-edged sword. And you did mention there were times where you felt like that authenticity was um, somewhat became a detriment or did not result in good partnerships. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What did you learn from that
Yeah.
experience?
Um, Without getting too deep into it, I'll tell you the one that always comes to my mind when anyone asks anything in this vein. Um, Obviously having a wine company is expensive and funding can be a challenge often. There have been times where we're like, oh, okay, wow, we got hit with a $15,000 bill we weren't expecting, which is jarring.
Wow.
And also still have to make this wine. And I'll never forget one of our earliest wine partners we thought was going to be really excited because, they touted about, oh, we love startups. We love women of color. We definitely want to help you succeed. And when I called them to say, hey, I can't pay this bill, knowing, by the way, that their other clients owed them hundreds of thousands of dollars and we owed them 14, just
Right.
to listen,
Mhm.
and they decided to hold our wine hostage. But it was right before Mother's Day. It's called Mom Juice, it's just like the most stressful thing ever. And I will never forget just, like having a call and being transparent of like, hey, this is what's going on. If I can get the wine that I own from you, then I can go sell it to this distributor and give you a check. But you have to give me the collateral I have to give that to them, like that's how we create transactions. And I'll never forget, they held it as leverage to teach us a lesson.
Wow.
And it was one of the most humbling experiences of my life to realize that obviously, this as life, especially being a Black girl, like this is not my first rodeo, right? But it's something to feel that you forged partnership and someone's kind of using it to slap you in the face and make an example out of you, even though you know that so and so has a $200,000 situation. They're not holding their stuff hostage, but they're choosing to pick on you.
Right.
Um, that was really devastating, right? But then I realized that I actually had a lot more power here than I thought and figured out how to leverage it for us of like, you know what? I will call my investor, I will get the loan, I will get this out. I'm going to move all of my hundreds of thousands of dollars of business from you immediately. We did it within a week. Everything was out. Moved to a different facility who's been wonderful to us.
Mhm.
And, I think it's not my job to be vindictive. God's got that. I'm good.
Right. Right.
So I've just, decided to focus. But oh, it was devastating at the time. I just remember sitting there kind of like this is in this like incredulous state of like, what is
Mhm.
happening? How can someone be so two-faced,
Yeah.
Which, makes you feel naive. But I think as adults, when we start these journeys, we gain back that sense of childlike wonder a little bit. And so it was kind of like a lesson for me of like, let's do some deeper due diligence into who people are.
Yeah.
Because you're going to keep showing up as yourself. Let's make sure that that's going to be honored. So it
Mhm.
did create more processes for us to make sure that, we still got to be the heartfelt leaders we wanted to be. But yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I think that is a great example of you sticking to your core values, your integrity, like who you are as a person and what your brand represents, right? And everybody on your team, they're going to move with a certain level of integrity. And that can be challenging because if you're working with someone who isn't, right? They're not moving with integrity. So but it says a lot for you to stay within who you are and stay true to yourself because like you said God will work out everything else, right? And I think it is a learning lesson of you you learn from that, right? And you learned like, okay, next time, who to work with, also
Mhm.
to how to leverage my own power. That was excellent. That was like, I was like, go ahead, Kristen, because she was like, okay, we have an investor. Let me get my product and we
Yeah.
can sell, and we will not work with you anymore. That's what we just going to do. We're not going to like, we can just make it easy for you.
I
You don't
mean,
even need to teach us a lesson
I
ever
think we have
again.
to learn, right, that just as much as we feel like people wronged us, we have the decision to give them the privilege to work with you or know you. And at any time, you can revoke that access.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Yes. Yeah. They don't need to have access to you.
No. Mhm.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. That was excellent. Excellent example of that. Um, and so you talked about some maybe challenging things along the way. And also I may skip around. I'm going to go to a question that I think relates to some of the things you were saying before. And so before you were saying that you were in the telecom business, and that was a very like male, white male, sounds like you said uh, sexist type of environment as well. And doing a little bit of research about the wine and spirits industry, I was really baffled to see that it is, I think it was like only 1% of African Americans like are own their own wineries or like have their own like own their own wine businesses.
Mhm.
And I was just like, wow, I didn't even think about that. Um, and so, do you foresee women and people of color having more ownership, receiving more recognition in the wine and spirits industry?
You know, I do, and I'm excited to see the growth.
Mhm.
I think there's so many different pathways in wine, right? From owning the winery like we do, to having a label, to maybe being a negotiant and, bringing in wine from different countries. Like Inez Best does that from I Best Wines and, is killing it. Um, there's so many pathways through. That 1% number is always interesting to me, right? Because maybe like 8 to 9% of wine brands are Black owned now. But the difference is the ownership, right? Because the, the curation is there, but the quality maintenance and the licensing and the ability to get distributed. And so it does create different guardrails to have a brand versus own the winery to create the product. Um, I'm really passionate about us entering in the industry kind of testing it out, but then taking that next step to actually owning it, because I think that's what creates a scalable business, right? Because let's say, for instance, give you an example, if the McBride sisters had just been a brand for Black Girl Magic, they absolutely could not have done what they did with it. There, it would have been extremely cost prohibitive. They definitely could have never had sponsored Essence Fest and done this big campaign because it would have cost them $14 a bottle to do that, and they would have made a dollar or two off of it, right? Versus actually having that ownership and having the margin and ultimately the revenue to continue to build this brand. And now, of course, they have a vineyard, which is wild and amazing. I think ownership is so important, and owning it to a area where it's scalable is more important, and making sure that we are doing that. But there are so many great organizations now. My favorite is the African American Association of Vintners, which, from us to McBride Sister to Danae from Lafette du Rosé to Krishan from Love Corkscrew, we're all in the same organization, down to people who haven't even launched their brand yet. So it provides this whole access point, and I feel like we're finally making our own network.
Yeah.
Right. I think wine is very much inherited and has the potential and the reality of being a good old boys network. I'm really excited that we've created something for Black people, people of color. I don't think AAAB actually denies anyone if they're melanated in any way. But we're creating our own network of collaborators and mentors and advisors and teachers. And um, that's how you move the industry forward. And wine is one of the oldest industries in the world. They were making wine in Samaria uh,
Yeah.
thousands of years before Jesus, BC. And it just shows you how much it hasn't changed until the last 25 years. So I'm excited to see that progress. I think it's going to be beautiful. And we're seeing it now, I think, in a lot of different spirits categories. So excited to see what happens.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, because there's a lot of expense because now that I think about it, like you said, it's inherited because a lot of wineries now you find that, it used to be farmland and it's like, oh, my family owned this farm and they've been owning this farm since the 1890s or,
Mhm.
1920s and they kind of pass it along and at some point they decide to make vineyards instead of
Mhm.
what it was before, maybe corn or, what have you. So that takes, someone giving you that land, right?
Right.
So, and having the capital to do that. So, appreciate that. Another in instance I was going to talk about was the Jack Daniel's whiskey. So I recently learned about Fawn Weaver and to let everyone know that what Fawn Weaver wrote a book about his name was Uncle Nearest. So his actual name was Nathan Nearest Green. And he was actually a former slave who was the master distiller for Jack Daniel's whiskey. And he actually is the person that taught all of Jack Daniel's family how to distill whiskey. And there's still people in his family now that work at the Jack Daniel's whiskey. But now Fawn Weaver told the story about Uncle Nearest, and now there is a whiskey brand related to that.
Mhm.
And I think, does she own a distillery as well, or just the brand?
Yes, nearest
Yeah.
green distillery.
So yeah, so that was something I was like researching, I found as well. And I thought that was fascinating. And it made me really think if we really knew who was behind, like the labor that goes behind a lot of this work, I wonder if there's more stories like Uncle
Oh,
Near out
definitely.
there. Hmm.
Think about it, right? Let's just be honest here. Those white people were not out farming those grapes.
Yeah, right.
Let's be real. That's just the reality of, our country. Um, I think, and that's why I think Nearest Green story was so beautiful. And also, Fawn being an author beforehand really has helped tell that story so in such a different light than I think other brands have because she has that lens. She's also become an actual maverick in the spirits industry. I think what she's done is phenomenal. She's personally been very helpful for me in my journey. So I'm a huge Fawn fan and a huge Uncle Nearest fan. I have some on my bar cart right now behind me, but Yeah, and that goes back to ownership,
Right. Yeah.
right? She's not just having the brand, she owns the distillery. It's gorgeous, and massive. I think she continues to be the most awarded whiskey ever. Uh,
Wow.
so there's a lot there, right? And there's a lot of ways to make impact now.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah, that was such a fascinating story. And so hopefully I think that that will open the door for more people, women and people of color to be in the wine and spirits industry, or for people to get recognition for the work that they've done that's gone hidden for many years. Because it is a lot of labor. So someone did that labor, right?
Right.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so let me see. Um, Okay, I'm gonna ask one more question and then I'll open it up to the group so I won't monopolize your time. Okay, so um, you talked about it a bit about the experience with the one distributor, but what are some life lessons that you learned and are still learning from, creating KT Winery?
I have always been a very ambitious person. Even when I was in grade school trying to sell cookies to my family members, and I couldn't bake back then, y'all. It was nasty, but I kept trying to sell them. To starting my business in college to now. And one of the biggest lessons for me has been that balance has to come in at some point. And whether that balance be yourself and my health journey, my partner, and making sure I spend time with him, to making sure that my passions outside of work are exist. I'm a heavy believer that every entrepreneur should be in therapy. I'm actually a heavy believer that everyone should be, but we'll start with entrepreneur to make it better.
Mhm.
I think my therapist asked me this question about 4 or 5 years ago. If you took away work, what does Kristen do? Who is she?
Mhm.
And it's like, oh, well, like I like to cook and entertain for people. He's like, not the right answer. And it became a journey to figure out those answers and to become something more than just the CEO. Um, so that's a life lesson I've learned, but have been learning about how to grow and how to develop in. Um, I think it's really important that we spend time with the people who we want to spend time with and people we care about. Because growing in this career is amazing. Don't get me wrong. But I do have now the perspective of sitting down at 55 and realize I had no one to celebrate any of the wins with. So what really was the point of the big success?
Mhm.
So that's been a big thing. Um, the second caveat to that, the second piece of that is health is the base of everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes we choose as entrepreneurs to keep working versus eating that lunch, that healthy lunch, or keep working versus working out, or keep working. Oh, and we have to work. And eventually, at some point, your body starts telling you what's going on.
Yeah.
And I've seen the entrepreneur have to go to the hospital. Like I've picked my friends up from the hospital because they burnt themselves out. They didn't take care of their body and didn't listen to warning signs, didn't go to the doctors like they should have. So it's now become one of those non-negotiables for me, health and relearning health. And this day and age with food being how it is in the US and understanding how to eat for myself and how to make things work. So, yeah, I think prioritization of health has been huge. Um, yeah, and the final life lesson for me is truly everything mental. We have these personal trainers who can help train your body, but we have to also train our mind. And I'm not trying to pass on any generational trauma. I'm not trying to be unaware of where I can be better and be a better partner, be a better friend, be a better daughter. So yeah, I'm very much in my prioritization of me stage, even though I'm building this big business, because I do think it makes me better at my job
Yeah.
because I'm stable and happy. And
Mhm.
when things get really hard, it's not all I have anymore. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, yeah, those are great pillars. And also too that yeah, health just being the base because if you're not well, then if you burn out, then you can't do what you want to do. So resting and taking care of yourself is your ability to recharge and to keep going. Everything needs to rest. Everything in life has a resting period. So that's definitely needed. Okay, thank you so much.
That's a wrap for today's episode of More Than the Hype. If you love this conversation, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. It helps way more than you know. Until next time, stay bold, stay real, and keep chasing the hype.